Have you been thinking about selling your farm to your farming area on a contract for deed? Not sure where to start? Watch this video to learn more. Hi, I'm Jason Wagner, the farm lawyer. I work with family farmers every single day to help them pass the farm on to the next generation. At my firm, Wagner Ayler, we've been doing it for over 50 years. So today I'm talking about contract for deeds and how they fit into the farm succession plan. I commonly use contract for deeds in my farm succession plans for a few reasons. One reason is that it can be a pretty simple and immediate way for us to reward that sweat equity and get the farm into the hands of the farming heir while still providing you a source of income. But when we're using contract for deeds, we have to be intentional and we have to make sure that the contract for deed fits into the overall farm succession plan. So it might surprise you, but a lot of times when people come in, they're not so concerned about the price that they're going to sell the land for. They're more concerned about the payment that they're going to get and the payment that the farming heir can actually afford. So when we're looking at that, sometimes we want to be thinking about, well, what are they paying for rent right now if they've been paying rent? We also want to be thinking about, well, what can the farm actually afford? Does your farming heir have an off-farm job, or is the farm the sole source of their income? The answer to those questions can dictate how we actually set this up. If the farm is the sole source of income, the farm itself actually has to be able to pay for itself. And when you run those numbers, you're going to find out that we're not going to be able to sell it at fair market value. We need to have some discounts. We need to put some sweat equity into it. We don't have to just sell it for what you're renting it for. I mean, they are getting equity now. They're not just paying you rent. So a lot of times we do sell it for a higher amount than just what the rent's been. Take, for example, maybe they've been paying rent of $15,000 a year. Maybe we're going to make those payments $30,000 a year or $40,000 a year. Again, we're getting past the point of them just paying you rent. They're also building equity now, and there should be some more dollars attached to that. Likewise, you can only sell it once. You can always increase the rent or rent it to somebody else if it doesn't work out. Once you've sold it, it's sold. So we want to make sure that you're not selling it so cheap that you don't have anything to live off of in retirement. So once we've settled on, what we think we want for a monthly payment or a yearly payment, now we can start to back into what the actual sale price is. But there's one other factor that's really important. We need to know what the interest rate is. And here we're going to be limited to the applicable federal rate. This is also known as AFR. This is a rate that the IRS puts out every month. So does that mean we have to change the interest rate every month of the contract? No, nothing like that. It just means that in the month of closing, we need to know what is the rate that the IRS says is the minimum amount that I have to charge. And why do they do that? Well, because with interfamily loans, we need to make sure that there's some interest in there. We can't sell it at 0% interest. So most of the time, we're looking at the long-term AFR and in the month of closing. Right now, in 2026, that's hanging around 4.5%, depending on when we're actually looking at it. So now we know the monthly payment or annual payment, and we know the interest rate if you want to charge the minimum amount is the AFR. Then we can run that into an amortization schedule. Is this going to be a 20-year term on a contract for deed? Is it going to be a 30-year term on a contract for deed? 30 years, it's going to push that purchase price up a little higher if that's what you want. 20 years, it's going to allow them to pay it down faster and gain that equity even faster. So pick the rate, pick our monthly payment or annual payment, and then pick our term. We can get all those together. Now we've got a purchase price. And you're going to find out real quick when you plug those numbers in, that purchase price is going to be a lot less than what the farm is worth. We might be looking at $500,000 purchase price or $550,000 purchase price on a farm that could be worth over $1 million to make the numbers work. Again, if we're selling it to a farming heir, the farm has to pay for itself, and that's what it's going to take. And that's okay. But what about that gift? So you've sold this $1 million farm for $550,000. What happens with that $450,000 of discount that you did? Well, that's going to be called a gift. You can think of it as a reward of sweat equity. You can think of it as a family discount. Either way, it is a gift in the eyes of the IRS, and we have to report that gift. But remember, on January 1st, 2026, the federal gift tax exemption went up to $15 million. So unless you've given another $15 million or close to that during your lifetime, this $450,000 gift is not going to incur federal estate tax, okay? Report the gift, make sure the IRS knows you did it. You're not going to pay gift tax. Your buyer's not going to pay gift tax. What about Minnesota? Again, check out my other videos. I talk about this a lot. Minnesota does not have a gift tax. What it has instead is a 3-year look back. So if you sell this Minnesota farm and you die as a Minnesota resident, we're going to look back and pull those gifts in that were made within 3 years of death. So that $450,000 is still part of your estate. It's important to remember the entire contract is still part of your estate too. It's just that after 3 years, we're only going to be looking at the principal balance and interest on that contract that remains. We're not going to be looking at what the fair market value of it was when you sold it because more than 3 years has passed. So we've got now our term, our payments, our purchase price. But do we really want this contract to run the whole term? Do we really want it to go 20 years or 30 years? Maybe you've sold this farm when you're 70. Maybe you don't want it to be hanging out there for another 30 years. You might not be here. Maybe you don't want your other kids who might be getting a portion of the contract for deed to be sitting around waiting. So we can have some triggers in there. Maybe we want to have a 5-year balloon. That's a little early, or a 7-year balloon, or a 10-year balloon. That just means that you hit that mark, the entire balance is now due. They either go get a bank loan or they negotiate with you to re-amortize it or extend it. Another trigger could be maybe you want it paid within a year after your death. We have to be a little careful of this one because we want to make sure they would actually have the ability to do it. What if you sell it in year 1 and you die in year 2? Now all of a sudden they have to pay it off before year 3. Oof, that might not work so well. So we got to be thinking about that. Maybe we say within a trigger that's due within a year of death, but only as long as you die, say 10 years down the line or something like that. And why would we want it to be due at the time of your death? Well, the contract for deed, seller's interest is still part of your estate. Maybe you're still owed $200,000 on that contract when you die. You can then take that and gift it through your estate to your non-farming heirs. Maybe you've got 2 non-farming heirs. Now they've got $100,000 each coming off of this contract, which can maybe help make things a little more fair in the grand scheme of things. So what does that mean? Well, your farming heir who's buying on this contract for deed, you die, they still owe $200,000. They pay that now to your trust, and your trustee divvies it out to your 2 non-farming heirs. So even though the contract for deed is part of the farm succession plan, if we build it into the rest of your estate plan, it can also be a source to help fund an inheritance for the non-farming heirs. That does lead us to an important consideration. The seller's interest in the contract for deed is property, just like anything else. It has to be part of your estate plan. So a lot of times we build this contract for deed. We also want to have the farm estate plan, the trust, built around it, okay? We've got our trust, we've got our seller's interest in a contract for deed. We're going to put that inside of our trust so that if you become incapacitated, keep getting payments. You die, it can keep getting payments. Then it distributes it out according to your wishes. We want to make sure that we're thinking about this contract in the grand scheme of things in the rest of your estate. Likewise, it's really important that the buyer on that contract for deed have an estate plan. As I said, okay, they're making payments on this contract for deed, but most of the time they've also acquired a huge amount of equity as well. their balance sheet just went up in value quite a bit. What could happen in their estate has changed dramatically when they became a buyer on this contract for deed. So even though they might be younger, maybe they don't even have kids yet, it's still important that they have an estate plan in place, even if it's just, a will, power of attorney, and healthcare directive. So again, we know who can step in and make sure that things are taken care of if something happens to them. So this is why contract for deeds are something that the attorneys at my firm, Wegner Ehler, work with all the time on our farm succession plans. The contract for deed isn't just a real estate transaction. It's not a document. It needs to be part of your entire farm succession plan and journey. So if you've liked what you've heard, check out farmlawyer.com, subscribe and follow. If you want to work with one of the attorneys at Wegner Ehler, give us a call, 507-288-5567.